Hey guys, so today I just want to review two books that are an invaluable resource to me that I use almost daily. So let's talk about these today. So the first book I want to talk about is the Homeric Hymns by Charles Boer. It was written in 1970. This version was, and it's more of an update of the Homeric Hymns Volume 2 from 1932, I think he says in this book. And as you can tell, it's gotten some love, and it's a very old book. 1970 again when this was published, and the book cover has not actually held up well over the years, but then again, I use it so much, I'm not surprised. And as you can see from the inside, under the cover, it's just a red book. Nothing special underneath this book cover, so I try to keep it as all together as much as I can, even though eventually I can tell that this cover is going to eventually just go and be gone. So the book itself, it's very bare bones. It was again an updated translation from, like I think he said, 1932, the Homeric Hymns Volume 2. And as a text itself, it is in modern English, which is why I enjoy reading this book. When it comes to the Homeric Hymns, I always try to make it as simple to me as possible. The reason being so I don't focus so much on trying to translate Old English or the literal translations in English that you'll see on some sites. I like to more focus on the modern translation to make it easier so I can focus on the gods and not so much on trying to figure out how to say certain words, or in a way like a backwards English, which would be more of a literal translation of the Homeric Hymns. With that said, he does not follow the hexameter or the meter, the metrics of the ancient Greek texts. He tries to update it so it is easier to read. Now, Charles Boer, from what I can tell from this book, he writes it and he has a forward and an afterthought kind of thing in the book, and he mentions that it was written for students and he appreciates the students. So I guess Charles Boer was a college professor, is my guess. I don't know Charles Boer, and this book was written before I was even born. So, but as a text itself, it is a valuable resource. I'm not sure how you can find it. I'm sure you probably could find it like on Amazon or another website, but I found it at a local bookstore, and I needed the Homeric Hymns, and I bought it, and I have really enjoyed it. Again, it's not written from a polytheist perspective. It is written as a teacher to a student kind of thing. The hymns are there. All the hymns are there. And what's interesting about the Homeric Hymns is that it's not just prayers, but some of the most famous Greek myths come from the Homeric Hymns, such as Demeter searching for Persephone. That is in the Homeric Hymns. So not only are they prayers, but they are some of the myths that are famous are in these prayers. With that being said, the Homeric Hymns are not always my go-to when it comes to actual ritual, because they are pages long. Like the prayer to Demeter is long because it's the story of her looking for Persephone. Now, people do use that in their rituals and prayers, but if you don't have that much time, the Homeric Hymns are awesome. But you had to have some of the prayers you have to either condense or have the time for, because they are long stories. And so as far as translation goes, this is a good one to have because it's in modern English, but it's not a literal translation. He even says in the intro to the book that it's not a literal translation of the actual Homeric Hymns, but more of a update, because he wanted to capture what the words are saying more than what the literal saying words are. So if that is not your thing, If you want the more literal translation in English, this is definitely not the book. But as a prayer book, it is good because as you can see, it's been used, and I would recommend it if you're into modern English in an easier way to read it, so you're not focusing so much on trying to understand what you're reading and put more focus onto your prayers and rituals. Then I would recommend Charles Boer's The Homeric Hymns. All right, so when it comes to the Orphic Hymns, there's no better translation to me in the modern English than Patrick Dunn's The Orphic Hymns, and it's a new translation for the occult practitioner. So this is written by a pagan / polytheist author and is published by Llewellyn. So there you go. That alone will tell you the source of who is writing this book. So this book was published in 2018, and this is definitely a go-to book for me. That is, the English translation is awesome. And what's even cooler about this book is that they give you the literal Greek as well. So, for example, one page will have the English translation, and on the right side of the page, and then on the left, for example, would be the literal Greek. And I'm not talking about Greek translated into English. I mean, it's literally Greek written. So that's really interesting. And as it says, for the occult practitioner, there are also suggestions for spells and rituals and how to use the hymns in your rituals. And another interesting thing that I really do like about this book is that it also suggests the types of incense to use for your prayers. So it doesn't just give you the prayers. It doesn't just give you the prayers in literal Greek, if you can read Greek, but it also tells you like the kind of incenses that were traditionally got to go with these prayers. So it's extremely helpful, especially if you are a occult practitioner, as the book is geared towards. Not really. I mean, it's not really geared just to occult practitioners, but those that follow Hellenic polytheism. It's an invaluable source, and it's a beautiful book. It is, again, the Orphic Hymns by Patrick Dunn, and you can tell that this book is a beauty right here, and it's modern. And I won't open the cover, but it's not just a black book underneath the book sleeve. It actually has more art under it. So as a book itself, it's something that I highly recommend. And the pages are a bit smudged because I would use this book for prayers and rituals. In every video you ever see me do, if it's a Homeric hymn, it comes from Charles Boer's Homeric Hymns 9 times out of 10. And the Orphic Hymns are always, this book is always my go-to source for the Orphic Hymns. I only have to look for another translation because this is the translation I always use. So that is a shout out to Patrick Dunn, because this book is fantastic. And I would highly recommend you finding this book, because it is new, 2018, and it is available everywhere and anywhere. So there's no reason why not to have this book, because this is a must-have. Again, it's a beautiful book, and it has the Greek for you. It has the actual modern, again, it's a modern translation of the Orphic Hymns into English. So you don't have to worry about, so see, my thing about it is I'm not really into the thee and thine and thou kind of talking, or again with a hexameter worrying about the beats and the meters and the literal translation, because I want to focus more on my prayers and God, without having to worry about translating some words out of Old English, like a King James Bible, for example. But if you like the Orphic Hymns and you want a modern English translation, this is definitely one to pick up, and I use it all the time.